Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. The North Carolina-Alabama game. And I'll be honest, like this was just a weird game. And it was funny because I was telling my wife, Mrs. T, she picked North Carolina to win the national championship. She asked me going into this game, how was the bracket looking? And I said, North Carolina to me, outside of a UConn or Purdue, I think North Carolina had been as consistent as anybody in college basketball, but I never felt like they were great. I just felt like they beat all the teams they were supposed to. Lost in the out-of-conference to UConn, lost in the out-of-conference to Nova, lost in the out-of-conference to Kentucky. But they get to the ACC, they beat everybody they're supposed to, and this game was wild because North Carolina was up 54-46 at halftime. And even in the second half, as Bama made it, I don't know, I never really felt like North Carolina was going to lose this game. But then a couple really interesting things happened. First of all, credit to my guy, Grant Nelson. Okay, so Grant Nelson, for people who forget, was the transfer from North Dakota State in the offseason. And we talked an awful lot about Grant Nelson when he transferred, because I sat there and said that I believe that he was one of the best transfers. Remember, he declared for the NBA draft. He didn't withdraw till June. Then he enters the portal. And I said he's like one of the 5 best players that entered the portal last offseason. Well, I bring it up because he's been at Bama, and it's largely been a disappointment for Grant Nelson throughout the season. Just kind of looked like a guy that doesn't really look like he belonged at the Power 5 level. Well, I'll tell you what, Grant Nelson, how about you save your best game for the biggest game of your career? Remember, this is a kid 2 years at North Dakota State. I talked to him on Wednesday at the media availability. He had never played in the NCAA tournament. And so how about Grant Nelson, 24 points, 12 boards, 5 blocks, including what ended up being the game winner because he missed a free throw at the buzzer. And oh, by the way, 10 of 13 from the foul line, the best game of his career and the biggest game. Grant Nelson leads the Alabama Crimson Tide to victory. By the way, fun fact about Grant Nelson. We talked about when he was in the portal. From Devil's Lake, North Dakota. I was obsessed with Devil's Lake last summer. If you watched all of our portal updates, I asked him about it. He said, yeah, there's basically just a lake and you either fish or you play basketball. And he's like, it's way too cold to do anything else during the winter. I asked him how cold it got. He said it got to -70 this year in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. So shout out to Grant Nelson. Shout out to Devil's Lake, North Dakota, but they get the win. I think the only other thing from the Alabama perspective, listen, I've said it throughout the year. Nate Oats, listen, Dan Hurley should be your national coach of the year. I believe Nate Oats has done as good of a job as anybody in college basketball this season. Because the bottom line remains to me pretty simple. Is I look at this team. This is a team. Their best players, their 3 best players, Mark Sears began his career at Ohio, had 18 points on Thursday night. Grant Nelson began his career at North Dakota State, 24 points. Aaron Estrada began his career at St. Peter's, transfers to Oregon, doesn't play, transfers back down to Hofstra. Now he's at Alabama. So you're basically talking about players from Hofstra, Ohio, and North Dakota State are your 3 best players. And you are in the Elite 8 after putting up 89 points against North Carolina. I think he's done as good of a coaching job as anybody in college basketball. And what's crazy is, I'll tell you this, is that I really feel like, and I truly mean this, is that I really feel like Alabama is actually built for next year. You look at this team. By the way, I should mention, not only are their 3 best players that they played at North Dakota State, Ohio, and Hofstra. Their only top 50 recruit this last cycle was Jaron Stevenson, who's ironically from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He was a guy that reclassified in June. Wasn't going to play college basketball this year, didn't commit till June. Guys off the bench came in late. One of the guys came in from West Virginia after Bob Huggins got fired. By the way, I asked Nate Oats about this at Media Day on Thursday. He got a kick out of it on Wednesday. Because like I said, Coach, people forget you not only lost your best players off of last year's team, 5 of your top 6 players, you lost all 3 assistants. And I said, what was April like last year? And he started cracking up at the podium. He said, listen, I'm thrilled for all those guys that got head coaching jobs, but I kind of wish it didn't all happen at the same time. That was kind of tough for me. Well, the roster that Nate Oats essentially put together all by himself, 89 points. They're going to the Sweet 16. But again, look at this roster. I don't think anybody's going to the NBA next year. So you lose Aaron Estrada. You've already replaced him with a player out of the portal. And you're bringing in 3 high-level recruits next year, including 2 McDonald's All-Americans. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Alabama is going to its first Elite Eight since 2004, second in school history. I want to celebrate that. But at the same time, Alabama, I think they're really built for next year, and I think they might be your preseason number 1 team going into the 2024 season, 2024-2025. Really quickly from the Carolina perspective, I don't know what there is to say because I think my take on Carolina has been pretty consistent all season. Felt like RJ Davis, Armando Bacot, and then everybody else was just kind of a role player. And there was never that guy like UConn. If you want to say Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer are their 2 best players, well, Klingon could go for 20 on any given night. Alex Caravan could go for 20 on any given night. And you look at Carolina, I just never felt like they had that third guy. Now, it didn't cost them during the regular season, but you look at this game, it sure did cost them on Thursday night because Armando Bacot was in foul trouble, finishes with 19 points, 12 boards. RJ Davis finishes with 16 points, but he's 4 of 20, 0 for 9 from 3. Yes, let me be the millionth person to reference that RJ Davis and Caleb Love, former teammates, combined to go 0 for 18 in the same building in Staples Center / crypto.com arena on Thursday night. But beyond that, they got a good game from Cormac Ryan, 17 points, but they just never had that third guy that could take over. And so now for Carolina, I think it's disappointing, but I think you kind of maximized the talent on the roster that you had. Armando Bacot is not an NBA player. RJ Davis was a first-team All-American. But outside of them, I just never saw that other guy that could take over games. And so now, Sweet 16 kind of feels like the ceiling for what this team was. Now, I picked them to go to the Final Four just because I didn't trust Arizona in this bracket, and I think Alabama has largely overachieved. But it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. North Carolina has a very good recruiting class coming in. And I think they'll be interesting going forward. Elliot Cadeau should be back. Obviously, Ian Jackson's coming in. Drake Powell, both McDonald's All-Americans. I think it's a disappointing end for Carolina. It's a disappointing end because it is a game you could have won. I didn't even mention it, but Carolina was up, 2-3 points with a minute to go. Let me pull this up really quick so I make sure I have it right. Carolina lost this game. I'll tell you exactly where they lost it, and I hate to put it on one kid. But Carolina was up 85-84 with a minute to go. And for some inexplicable reason, one of their forwards, Jalen Withers, decided to shoot a 3 with a minute to go, in control, plenty of time on the shot clock. Jim Jackson, my guy, I love Jim. I've worked with him forever. On the broadcast was like, what the heck was that? And then he ended up being prophetic because Carolina from that point got outscored in that game 4-2 and 5-2, and they ended up losing the game by 3. So credit to Bama. They get the win. They move on. How about this? Clemson, Bama to go to the Final Four. Let me use the same cliche that everybody else has. Yes, that sounds like a great college football playoff game. But here we are, Clemson and Bama heading to the Elite Eight. They will play Saturday.